glad that you are moving in the blended learning direction. We're trying to move the tide in that direction as well. I don't know if the Charter School Growth Fund is one of your funders, but when I first left Chicago Public Schools, I had the opportunity to travel around the country with the Charter School Growth Fund with a couple of entrepreneurs and residents who were designing a school, and I was originally planning to be the principal of that blended school.
Oh, nice.
And it was after the tour of 22 schools around the country that we realized the technology that they needed to design a real college prep was not there. It didn't exist. And so I actually had been working with the ThinkCERCA framework in Chicago Public Schools, and we raised Explore scores. And I don't know if you use Explore in your network, but Explore being a pretest to ACT.
Right.
We had significant gains on Explore scores with the 1,900 eighth graders that we used the ThinkCERCA framework with on paper, and are making that kind of scalable through the technology. So we essentially focused on argumentation across disciplines based on 30 years of University of Chicago research that shows that there are very discrete classroom practices that can increase career and college readiness. And the thing that has the greatest impact is to have students across all classes writing papers to defend their point of view of ideas 5 or more times compared to less than 5 times per month. And then the second greatest impact came from having students improve a piece of writing as a class or with peers. Even in science class, for the schools who have a STEM focus, I think it's really important for people to see that using evidence or data to support an argument or hypothesis has the greatest impact on science scores. And literacy is obviously underlying achievement in all of these areas. So in this graph, which is from the Forgotten Middle, ACT proved that students who were at career or college and career readiness benchmarks in readings had a great chance of being there in math. And without being at reading benchmark, they had only about a 14% chance of being there in math and a 1% chance of being there in science. So literacy was kind of the big key. And when again, I was working with over 100,000 kids, I realized that the teachers were standing in classrooms with really pretty impractical challenges before them. So do you use NWEA data in your network at all?
No, I don't think so.
MAP testing or STAR or some kind of growth assessment?
Yes.
Or do you just, okay. So I was working with teachers and principals to try to put, processes and systems in place at the school level to improve differentiation and rigor at the same time. Because what we found was in these extremely diverse classrooms that teachers were really feeling that they were not able to differentiate, that they didn't have the resources or they didn't have the time or they didn't have the knowledge and skill. And so we were trying to help them achieve that goal of differentiation because the problem we were seeing was this, which is that kids were coming in at all different levels as they do. And as we looked at the way they were spread out over the beginning of the year where, a lot of kids were actually coming in proficient or above proficient. But then by the middle of the year, those same kids had slid back. Those same kids were actually becoming less college ready as they progressed through our system. And that was absolutely heartbreaking, obviously. So we really tried to address the problem at the instructional level because all of the strategic plans were in place, but we knew that it really boiled down to what was happening in the classroom. And teachers were, really trying to do it. I mean, they were trying to help the students that were struggling, and they were trying to differentiate. But it was kind of like, where does the time for that get built into your school day? And you talked about just limited funding, and that is a strain on teacher time. So we decided that if we really wanted to see this happen, which is leveraging technology for all that it can do that we can't do, paper can't do, and freeing the teacher to be the most valuable resource in the classroom to do what only a teacher can do, that we needed to kind of deliver lessons directly to the students. So we basically developed, as people have written a bunch of books on things, some more consumable ways of getting at that. So we took the Common Core state standards, which we really don't label by Common Core because, first of all, these are kind of things that Aristotle was teaching, essentially. And you can't really slice and dice them into very discrete places because they're big standards. They're like the STAR assessments in the sense that there are end of course exams that ask you things about, where a writer should put a sentence or comparing multiple texts and those kinds of things. So we basically broke down what we call 21st century skills and concepts into flipbook style mini lessons so that a teacher can introduce them. And, in some cases, the students can do them on their own as review. A lot of teachers use them as live whole class instruction just because of limited technology access. But in the one-to-one schools, we see that teachers actually just assign it as it was designed, which is an independent, self-paced learning tool, just like a Khan Academy, except video was challenging for most of our schools. So we actually reverted to this picture book style with audio support instead. And there's an assessment that follows it. And then we developed a bank of lessons, and there's different kinds. These ones that focus entirely on informational text and on science and social science topics are, the kind of typical passage-based readings where good reading, we teach kids to use the CERCA framework as a lens for reading, where we're constantly evaluating things as arguments of sorts, whether it's an infographic or a reading about whether these real-life superheroes should dress up and patrol the streets of Minneapolis. Just good informational text reading. And then there's a quick assessment, and then, teachers can level and differentiate from grades 4 to 12. We actually go down to grade 3. We just don't subscribe grade 3 students unless they're high achieving. We found that most of the grade 3 students really were not at Common Core levels or at kind of rigorous on track for college writing levels that we tried to align our pieces to. So they were still more in the learning to read phase than in the reading for analytical reading purposes. So the third grade level becomes more of a level down for the fourth graders. And then, we also have these applied lessons, and this is where we take the concept, say, of evidence, and we look at not only what is evidence, but what's valid, what's reliable. How do you select it? How do you arrange it? How do you integrate it into an argument? The really hardcore, kind of deep college prep literacy skills that really make you a good reader and a good thinker and a good writer, and hopefully a good collaborator. We encourage teachers to use these as collaborative peer-to-peer lessons as well. So there are 10 levels of readings. Each unit deals with an essential question. So this one is, what is the best role for the government to play in the health of its citizens? So a fourth grade level reader might be reading about bike lanes and the impact it has on cities, whereas a 12th grader might be reading about trans fats. But each student is then brought through the topic overview where we model the Tier 2 college prep vocab and have students make a personal connection and then read with audio support if they want it or need it. There's in-text vocab, so they can click on a phrase and it gives them the definition as it's used in the sense of the article. The audio support is not voice-to-text. It's actually human voice. And we also have, obviously, comprehension check from which teachers can do item analysis. If you do a lot of data-driven instruction and you're tracking student achievement on standards and looking at trends in a classroom or for a student across time, you can do that analysis with a click of a couple of buttons. And then there are readings that, again, just are engaging readings. They are complex texts that are relevant to the students' lives today. And each one of them has features that we hope students will begin to notice. And, multiple points of view is one of them. In this case, we're going to ask students to write an argument about whether or not the writer presents a convincing argument about whether or not displaying calorie counts actually works to reduce obesity. So we're going to have them look for evidence that supports that claim and evidence that does not support the efficacy of displaying calorie counts. And then we're going to ask them, before they write what they want to say, we're going to write, we would say, they say, I say. One of our advisory board members is Gerald Graff, who wrote the book, They Say, I Say. That's often cited in various standards. But he insists that in order for us to make a good academic argument or a good professional argument, that we first summarize what that argument is that's being had before we join the conversation. So we provide sentence stems to build academic language, but also to prompt students to do those academically rigorous and disciplined kinds of thinking. And then after summarizing, the students build their argument. So taking what they've highlighted and annotated in a previous step, they build an argument that becomes a formal piece of writing later. And actually at this step right here, depending on how you schedule, and this is like the challenges and the mechanics of blended learning, depending on how you schedule your technology access, the kids can have the technology for long enough in their hands to be able to stop right here after they've built a preliminary argument and engage in peer-to-peer discussion and debate. The writing will be far better, and particularly in science, your achievement will go way up. And that is just based on good old-fashioned constructivism, but also the work of Jonathan Osborne at Stanford, who has proven that just the peer-to-peer, and we also do a lot with brain science on social and collaborative learning, peer-to-peer collaboration is an essential part of what we think students need to be career and college ready. So after they have had that opportunity to talk, hopefully, if their keyboarding skills are in place so they can fit in keyboarding and discussion in the class period, which may not happen on day one, to be realistic. If it's the first encounter with technology or if there's limited scheduled time with technology, both of those are choices that teachers have to kind of make. But when you get to the formal writing step, students actually develop a full-blown argument, and we recommend that teachers have them do this once a week. There are sentence stems to provide them step-by-step sort of hand-holding if they want it, but we don't like to teach kids that there's a formula. Wish it was that easy, but there is no formula for good writing. You just know it when you see it, and you know where you can improve once you have a piece of writing to work on. So the students write that formal piece of writing using the assistance of the guided process they went through, plus the sentence stems, and they submit it to a teacher who can then respond to it, providing legible and trackable comments, a quick scoring system that allows them to just give a quick 1 to 5 score on each of these components, but also to assign a growth focus that's personalized to the student. So in a blended learning environment, obviously what you want to do is leverage technology to personalize learning, so giving students not only something at their own pace, at their own level of readiness, and hopefully their level of interest, as well as the modality that they prefer to work in. You can really do a lot with these tools because students don't necessarily always have to default to academic writing. We do provide that, but we encourage teachers to have students submit infographics and pictograms and you name it. And in many cases, those are actually much harder tasks to complete effectively and use the rubric for standards-based grading to do that. So in the student writing, we often find that just trying to describe back to a student what they've done successfully and where they can improve is a challenge, and that the rubric-based system really does work to help teachers work as a team. I also may have failed to mention the growth focus is something that students can see across teachers because our framework works across disciplines. Our readings are in English, language arts, science, and social science, but we encourage math teachers on that student literacy team that they're probably capturing student writing anyway periodically. If they capture it online, for example, with a question like, are these two objects symmetrical? Why or why not? Those are kinds of, mathematical arguments. What's the best deal on a Pizza Hut pizza? We recommend Mathalicious as a partner for those great math assignments. And teachers can actually use our platform to develop their own content. So in addition to us recommending resources from all over the web and then building them into our technology, we also know that teachers like to curate things that they find. They can build them into the argumentation process by making a quick, what we call ThinkCERCA lesson. We also put together Pinterest boards for each one of our lessons to add additional multimedia content. Because, for example, you could be teaching in a class where everybody has heard of Cesar Chavez, but nobody's heard of Hitler. We don't know what your background knowledge deficits are necessarily because they can be varied. So what we did was put, in some cases up to 20 pins on a board that provides teachers with additional content that they can use to supplement background knowledge and prepare kids. We also have a dashboard that allows teachers to track the growth focus for the class, drill down to item analysis, and then see at a glance kind of how their class or how that student is doing. typically when a grade level team uses it, the English language arts teachers spend the first 8 weeks sort of rolling out the framework where they teach the kids what a claim is, what evidence is, those kinds of things. And then after that, the other teachers using our lessons or theirs or a combination of both reinforce the framework, hopefully once a week or at least twice a month. And then it obviously in storing student and teacher work gives an instructional leader the opportunity to really have like an RTI kind of everyday mentality where we can ask questions about students that might not otherwise get asked because we're capturing all of this previously uncaptured writing data. And then we're able to calibrate teacher expectations. So when you think about those growth assessments, and I don't know if it's a challenge in your network, but we've seen it pretty much everywhere all over the country, is that the students who come in most proficient are the ones who fall behind. And that's because they often they get the highest score on everything and are often not challenged. And I think that one of the things that we like to do is calibrate teacher expectations so that everyone has a growth focus. And if it means they're moving on to different grade levels, then so be it. That's what the differentiation is there for. But then having students or teachers respond strategically so that it's not kind of like, I told you last week to work on this, but now I think you need to work on this. And, I don't even remember because I graded 140 papers last week, and I don't remember what I told you to work on. This really helps us be more strategic. And I'll finish up with just an example of an implementation plan where a seventh grade team might be using multiple novels from our library and then combining that with the informational text that we provide that go with the novel. And students may be working both online and off. It sounds like you're moving to one-to-one, but even if you're using a paper-based novel because you can't let the kids leave with the devices, even having that sort of beanbag reading time, as I always call it, combined with 1 day of technology, frees the teacher from live presentation long enough to do the kind of personalized learning that only a human can do, that technology will never be able to do, which is really treating the student as a writer, not just kind of an assignment completer, and thinking about socio-emotional, collaborative skills, and the basic nuts and bolts of explaining to somebody how to use a comma, because as you've probably seen, kids can do the rote programs and do great, but then they can't apply it in their writing. And that really comes from that one-on-one help that we never have enough time in our schools to provide. So we do a lot of work with principals on creating blended learning environments. We actually just trained 72 principals on Friday for a full day and are happy to work with networks to do that. We're excited about everything that we learn when we go from one place to another, and we try to share out all of those good ideas so that we can figure this out a little bit faster, because obviously the kids need us to. So we're providing kind of the expert instructional design for lesson delivery for at least part of your week. If you want to use it for the whole week, so be it. But at least part of your week, you can count on kind of a lot of good differentiated lessons being available to you and having an engaging technology that will engage the kids with rigor and introduce them to the real kind of career and college readiness levels of writing that they kind of really need to attain in a world where so much of the way we represent ourselves is through writing online. We hardly look at us. We're not even talking face to face. It is through our written correspondence that we ended up talking to each other, and now through a written presentation, a visual presentation that I'm speaking to you, and that's kind of the world our students are entering. So that's what we try to prepare them for. So that's it. That's the end of my overview. And so now if you have any additional questions, I can answer them.
Okay, what different types of devices can you use this software? Is it a software or is it basically web-based?
It's cloud-based.
It's cloud-based.
It works on anything as long as it's as big as an iPad. It works on all the platforms, and it's device agnostic. And 24/7 access for parents, teachers, and students. And we've also translated our mini lessons into Spanish and Chinese. I don't know if you have English language learners in your network, but we found that engaging parents with the framework so that they knew what the kids were doing when they were kind of, talking about CERCA was helpful. So those additional resources to engage parents is something that we're building more and more of. But we have kind of 8 weeks of learn-along kind of lessons for them.
Okay. And you said it works on all types of devices, tablets, Chromebooks?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's all cloud-based? And it's mainly for your grades 4 through senior year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alrighty. And then as far as your subscription wise, does it go based on the number of students you have, or is it a site license that you have to buy?
Yeah. It's a per student, so it is $40 per student, and then we have a professional development fee that's a one-time fee for $1,000 to get teachers up and running on the platform provided.
Oh.
And, I mean, depending on the region, we're actually beginning to work with a lot of schools in Houston, so we're planning to set up. I mean, we will have a person based in Houston by June, and we'll be supporting hopefully what we hope will be a growing number of schools. And so that person would probably also coordinate ongoing professional development in the Dallas area as well.
Okay.